Very good. So I will find the right screen. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Excellent. Very good. So, as you can see, my presentation will be about metadata and palm leaf manuscripts, digitization projects, and online repositories, especially from Bali. So since some of you may not be familiar with the tradition of manuscripts from Bali and Southeast Asia in general, I will briefly introduce this type of objects. First of all, geographically, you see the small island of Bali is just next to the island of Java in what is now the state or archipelagic state of Indonesia. So it's a small territory, but with a very rich tradition of manuscript. And it was part once, of course, in the pre-modern world of the so-called Indic world, Sanskrit cosmopolis. So it was deeply influenced by Indian culture, Sanskrit language. And so it has its own tradition of manuscripts on palm leaves. So as you can see here, it is basically both Java and Bali share the same tradition of India, South Asia, Nepal, etc., with their own local peculiarities of tradition, basically, that was exported in the early medieval period. So we have basically a lot of text, probably several hundreds, if not thousands. Of course, very little has survived because of the climate. So we had much less than what was available in the past, written in several languages, Old Javanese, modern Javanese, Balinese, and other regional languages in the period from the 7th to the 16th century. And these palm leaf manuscripts are usually kept in collections, both private, so in private hands, or also state-sponsored collection, that is libraries or museums.
Okay, Andrea, just
yes,
one small request.
Please.
There's a small window which is hiding a part of the slide.
Ah, I see. You mean indeed the small window with my photograph, right?
No, it says telechargem or something.
Oh.
Looks like a file transfer or something. I'm not sure.
Sorry, can you repeat what it is saying?
It looks like a file transfer or something. It says telechargem or ... India 2021. Looks like a small pop-up, a dialog box.
Oh. Okay, let me, you know what I will do? I will just temporarily stop the screen sharing and I will try it because I cannot see anything. So what I will do is that I will, okay, go back to this and try to close as many things as possible.
And I think, Andre, now it's okay. I think it has gone. I think you can continue. Now it has gone.
Okay. Still, you know, let me please just give me a second and I will immediately resume just to be sure. Okay, I shall do it again now. Screen sharing. Okay, just is a bit slow now, but it should work now. Okay, so can you see the presentation?
Yes, it is clear.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. So yes, I was saying that basically this most of these palm leaf manuscripts go back to the 15th, 17th century in Java, and after the 18th, 19th century in Bali. So this manuscript, like the South Indian manuscript, cannot last for very long. They have to be continuously recopied. So it is relatively recent tradition, like Nepalese manuscripts, for example. And you have the whole span of literature, epic texts, Shaiva and Buddhist religious texts, legal texts, historical chronicle, etc. It's really a very rich literary heritage, very much influenced by the Sanskritic tradition. So we have already on the release of the early temples like the Borobudur and Prambanan in central Java, we have these depictions of manuscripts, as you can see here. Or here also loose leaves, so pretty much like the manuscript that we still have, you can see nowadays. So it was a very common, actually, you have many depictions of such manuscripts. Now we have the same, more or less the same type of supports we find in India. For instance, these two leaves, the Borassus flabellifer, which is called lontar, and which is found in the drier parts of Java and Bali, and it is the most common tradition of support. And the other is the Coripa utan, or umbraculifera, or gebang, probably corresponding to the Sanskrit Shritala, which is much rarer. It is also confined to the western part of Java, and it is usually manuscripts are earlier. So the earliest manuscripts belong to this tradition because the leaves somehow are stronger. They have survived for a longer time. So these are a couple of examples of Javanese manuscripts. One is the first is the Shritala, and the other is the Tala below. And this is the Balinese. So they are similar, but they use different scripts, as you can see. All of them derive from the southern Brahmi Indian prototype. And sometimes you come across these private collections in a dilapidated state. So you see manuscripts that are not properly taken care of because the Java, for instance, now is Islamic, so it's not a living culture anymore. Whereas on Bali, the Hindu religion is still very much forms the majority. So people have kind of preserved this tradition in the tradition. This is the Gedung Kirtia Library, a state-owned library, the earliest that was established already by the Dutch in the early 20th century, where several hundreds of these manuscripts are preserved. And also another recent institution in Denpasar, the capital of Bali, which hosts a couple of thousands of manuscripts on palm leaves. Other important collections are found in Jakarta, in Java, and also in the West. For instance, the Leiden University Library in the Netherlands is probably the most important collection outside of Indonesia, and also in Berlin, in the British Library in London, and in Paris. Now, in Bali, this tradition, as I was saying, is still alive. Of course, very few people can read the text and copy them, but there are. And this gentleman, Ida Deva Gede Chatra, still actually produces the leaves himself, processes the leaves, and engraves, copies the text. He has a collection of a couple of thousands of manuscripts copied by himself. And so this is how it looks like, one of these private collections that sometimes you find in private houses in Bali. So there is still some kind of ritual context there. And other literati are still working on these objects and writing the texts. Also, there is very much a kind of revival of this tradition among the youth. There are contests being organized for the best, let's say the best calligraphy, for copying manuscripts, etc. So it is still a living tradition. Now let's go to the problem of the data and the metadata. So my impression is that, so in the recent year, there's a huge impetus in Bali in digitization. So really several projects, several actors are starting to realize the importance of this heritage and digitize, put these things online. The problem is that there is much less emphasis on the metadata, which I think are as important as the data, absolutely. And this is a problem for the scholars, I think, for the specialists, not much probably for the general public, because they don't very much understand these things. For them, it's also very important from a conservator point of view, from a cultural point of view, to preserve the text, the object, the manuscript, but it is also very important to give the metadata, as you all know. Now, I will start by giving you an example of what is happening. And I think this is what should not be done. So this is a negative example, unfortunately. Now, this is a very well-known repository, the Internet Archive, that probably all of you have used because it is an invaluable repository of books that you can find, freely download. And it is interesting that from the very early in the project, the team took an interest in Balinese palm leaf manuscripts, and they created this Balinese digital library collection, digitizing basically the more than 2,000 long-term manuscripts from the institution in Denpasar, the Pusat Dokumentasi, so the state-owned institution, and putting them online, so you can access them through the main interface of the website, which is of course a very important undertaking. There are some problems, unfortunately, concerning the metadata. So from the technical point of view, it is excellent. They have done very good work in photographing the artifacts. As you can see, the quality is very good. This is how it looks like if you browse the site. And but unfortunately, it is very complicated to search. There is actually no catalog. There is just, as you can see on the left, metadata and text context search. And so if you're a scholar, let's say, who wants to search for a particular text or particular manuscripts, you can enter the word you are searching in that field. And basically, the first problem you have is that which transliteration system to use. As you know, these languages are transliterated into Roman script. And so if you look at the below on the left, you can see that the search field contains the word Bhuvana Kosha, which is the name of a text I'm working on at the moment. And I transliterated it using the international YAST, system for the transliteration of Sanskrit. And there is no match given, so I cannot find this text in the collection. Now I change, so I don't use I just use the normal, let's say, not the Shah, Atra Shah, and still no match. If I look for Bhuvana Kosha with the W instead of the V, for instance, the only match is given if I separate the word Bhuvana and Kosa, and I have one match. Okay, so as you can see, that they didn't, let's say, insert among the metadata all the possible, ways in which this text can be spelled. And it is indeed found, there are different spellings. For example, if I search Kosa, I have two matches. One is the same text, but it's written differently. Buana, B-U-A-N-A, and Kosa and Jnana Siddhanta, an alternative title. So you see, also concerning the other metadata, it's not very well done, I think. There are just, the language is Balinese, which is actually not correct because it is Old Javanese. Now, Bali has preserved 90% of these manuscripts are in Old Javanese, which is a literary translocal language, which was used both in Java and in Bali. It's like a Prakrit, basically. It's not the language of Bali. It's rather, a larger geographical area. And this has not been taken into account. This says Balinese. Also, there is no date, for instance. We don't know what this manuscript, when they didn't put the date. And also they say European libraries. So I don't know what it means, the collection. So we have problems with the metadata. And so this is the main problem for me. As a philologist, as a person working with text, I need to search and retrieve exact, matches. And here is the all possible alternative spellings in which this text is known in Bali, has been copied, transliterated, and so they didn't. Well, ideally, one should put all these, possible spellings in the search mechanism, so that still I can get to what I'm looking for, even though I'm inputting a slightly different spelling. And of course, we should decide which spelling system to use, which transliteration system to use. And I think it's the best golden standard is to use the internationally, agreed system, which is being used for several projects now. Another problem I was saying is that there is no catalog, basically. They just scanned the paper catalog, one of the many versions of the paper catalog going back to the 90s, I think. So that's something that is probably not a very, well, not a best practice to do. Ideally, it should have been a nice embedded, digital catalog. So much for this repository. Now I would like to briefly discuss another repository. This is a new website, a new project, very recent, a couple of years ago, called palmleaf.org. And this project is basically aims at inputting, so transliterating and transcribing, also in Balinese script online, the raw material provided by the digitized manuscripts of the previous repository, so more than 2,000 manuscripts. And as you can see, this is the basic interface. They put the image below, and then they give the Unicode Balinese script version, and then the Roman transliteration. Now, it has to be stressed that, as far as I know, this transliteration is done by a machine, or not by a human being, as far as I know, or at least it is probably the original one was done by a human being in the Balinese, and then it is converted into Roman script. This gives rise to a lot of problems, because as you can imagine, machine is far from being accurate, and also, there are several problems in this transliteration. But nonetheless, this is a very useful website, because you can basically quickly scan, an enormous amount of material. And so it is very useful for scholars and also the general public, although it has to be critically used. Now, for the metadata, well, this is what they basically present. They give the name of the collection, the title of the text in Roman and in Balinese, number of leaves, the dimensions of the object, the place of origin, and the year in both Shaka and Gregorian. So this is at least, let's say, well, an improvement with respect to the other repository, although there are also some missing, details. But well, this is, again, there is not really like a very a catalog interface. There is only a search facility, but nonetheless, it is of course a good idea to put all these data here. Now I would like to move to the project which I am carrying out with the, well, actually the Balinese staff is carrying it out, and I have obtained a grant from the British Library. I already collaborated with the British Library in the past for another of such projects in West Java, and this one we started before the pandemic and was delayed, so but it's still going on. It will resume, I hope, soon. It is focusing on the Balinese palm leaf manuscripts, especially of a collection of a private museum, a newly established museum in eastern Bali. So for this is, yes, the place, the museum, very nice, and the team. They usually work. They are very skilled in preserving these objects. They use, traditional oils and techniques to preserve, and they have carried out the digitization work over the past several months, and about 108 manuscripts have been digitized, and they will be put online in the main British Library Endangered Archives Project website. So this is the yes, the images. They will look like this. And now I would like to go through with you the basically the metadata that we are using. Now this is the most, let's say, I hope this is big enough for you. You can still see something. Otherwise, I will shift to the original file. Now, the main problem working, so the British Library basically requires a very detailed, they have their own format. And as far as I can say, it has often happened to me, sometimes the needs of librarians and archivists don't exactly match those of philologists, let's say scholars working with texts. All right, this is not necessarily a bad thing, this is the realm of archivists after all, and they know their job better than I do. But sometimes there are certain small problems that have to be overcome. So first of all, this is only a part of the sheet. There is also another part about the ownership, the history of the collection. This is only the description of the object. So we are filling this XLS, document, and you can see it is very detailed. It starts with the original references, any references on the object themselves, titles, and this is the first problem, I think. So the title in English. So we should translate the title, which is often impossible actually, because it's very, sometimes they're really very difficult to translate actually these titles. They have no particular meaning. They have proper names, etc. Then you have the title in Balinese script, and we are inputting those. And also, there are problems, of course, because these systems are not perfect. So sometimes it's not kind of reproduce exactly what is there. And then the transliterated title. And now they use for the transliteration the romanization tables of the Library of Congress. And this is the big problem for me, because I don't want to use this Library of Congress system, but rather I want to use the prevalent system used by scholars internationally. And this is for me a huge problem, but I cannot change that. So I have to use this again, Library of Congress, because it is meant for archivists and not for, I think, people working with these texts. Anyway, this is the first level. Then there is a content type, of course, manuscript description in both English and Indonesian. Then the next fields, the size and dimensions, the condition of the material, and the country of origin. And this is already, let's say a problem. Because, for instance, and I will tell you later, they will use the thing that, the name of the country. Basically, it's a problem because they require the name of the country to be in the pre-modern period. So there is no such thing as, Indonesia, of course, in the pre-modern period. So we cannot use that. We use Bali, and then we put associated country, Indonesia. Now the related regions are the regional parts of Bali. Then the related town and cities, and the part on the religions and belief systems, and related subjects. Now the date of the material. Here we use both the Gregorian and the Shaka character with some alternative dating systems. And so the other fields, as you can see, is the origin of the material, the ownership, also the owners of the collection. Now the problem of the authorship is sometimes, as you know, there are not many of such texts are anonymous, so we don't know the authors. We have to leave them blank. Sometimes we don't know the name of the scribes either. But this is a very, as you can see, very detailed. So this is, I think, very much like a very good standard of metadata, because it is very complete. But many times we have to leave these things blanks, because I have the impression that this is also meant for, of course, it's meant for material, for modern material, even for, video recordings, anything can be, not just. And often when you deal with the manuscripts, it's not so easy. For example, manuscripts can have several texts. So it is actually difficult to, to separate, to actually fill all these particular categories. Now the next fields, so about the languages of the material, and then thanks God we have Kawi. Kawi is the say Unicode name of Old Javanese. Is the way Balinese people refer to Old Javanese. They call it Kawi from Sanskrit, Kawi. And so we have that language, and we also have other languages. So sometimes there is some Balinese also there. The script, of course, we have put the Balinese script, other scripts, also the writing system, the direction. And then there is a part on access conditions, any restrictions, any embargo date. and the part on the copyright. So we have this also this aspect, which is basically the same for all the manuscripts. There is also a part about data protection, any sensitive information about people or places. And then, of course, there is the part very important about the files. So there has to be a very close correspondence between the the digital files, names, so the folders we have on our computers, and the name of the photographs and the metadata. So this has to be done very carefully. There has to be all the files have to be mentioned, the numbering, etc. Then we have the date of creation, of course, the alternative repositories, etc. So this is the technical part. And yeah, so this was the end of the presentation of our current project. So as I said, sometimes the problem is that there are different needs. These metadata actually respond to different needs. Textual scholars, the wider public, and also archivists and librarians. So the main problem for me is the transliteration system, which ideally should conform to the internationally prevalent norms. And unfortunately, sometimes there is absolutely no attention paid to this, like in the Internet Archive. While other times, like in for the British Library, they adhere to the Library of Congress, which does not have certain, ACRIs, for example. Just to give you an example, when I want to transliterate the guttural I cannot use that, N with the above dot, but I should use NG, for instance. And this is, well, deprecated. I also don't like to use two glyphs for transliterating a single grapheme or sound in Old Javanese. Then, yes, I mean, there are also now, projects being carried out, funded by European Union, for example, the Dharma project, and they have, published documents to explain the best standards. So it is hoped that this will become used by many people. So there should be some kind of agreement, and it should be easier to apply the same system to digital documents, and it can be searched by machines, by human, more easily. And this is very important for the metadata, I think. Another problem, as I said, is the country of origin. They wanted, for example, to use the name of pre-colonial or pre-state nation, countries, and this is tricky often. We don't know if to use Bali or what, Java, or, and we cannot use Indonesia. So the people searching for it, well, if they look for Indonesia, thanks God we had another field for related countries, but otherwise, they wouldn't find it. So it is potentially a problem here. There are, strictly speaking, no countries as we know it in the pre-modern period. Then, yes, it's the problem of the authorship, authors and creators and scribes. Many of these manuscripts are anonymous, so they cannot be firmly attributed to any individual, right? But this is not a big problem. Okay, so well, basically this I'm a little bit ahead of time, but this was my presentation. Perhaps since we have more time, I mean, I'm happy if there are any questions to take them or to clarify unclear points. Yeah. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Andrea. So I request the attendees to come forward with their questions. And can I also request you one thing? Can you please make us the host again?
I see. Okay, let me.
The name is Shashwateshwaryam Kanchi, the panelist.
Yes. Okay, so exactly. I'm trying right now.
Yeah,
Does
it's
it work?
done. Yes,
Very
thank
good.
you.
Thanks. All right.
Can you tell us something more about the Dharma project that you mentioned?
Yes. Okay, so that is, you may know there is this scheme for European Union funding of research already more than a decade going on. And a couple of years ago, a team in Paris and from the EFEO, École française d'Extrême-Orient, in Pondicherry, so one speaker later will be from that institution, and the university in Berlin and the Center for Recherche Nationale in Paris also. They have joined and created a team they have proposed a project which was granted, funded, on the domestication of Hindu religion in South and Southeast Asia. And that means the project focuses on the, let's say, institutionalization of Hindu asceticism. So let's say during the medieval period, they mostly look at Shaiva, actually, at Shaiva inscriptions, texts from a huge geographical area, not limited to India, but also Southeast Asia, from the point of view of textual studies, archaeology, to study how, let's say, early Shaivism, for instance, transformed into institutionalized religion, into monasteries, for example, or other forms of priesthood. And so they look at very much at the social aspect. And this team is very, wide. It's also formed. There is a partnership with the Center in Pondicherry. There are Tamilis, Sanskritists, many scholars also from Southeast Asia, from Cambodia, Indonesia. So they are really looking at a wide range of material, and very strong on, let's say, creation of online database. So they are basically creating an enormous database of inscriptions from Andhra, for instance, or South India, and Indonesia, Cambodia. So they are working on encoding text in TEI, XML format. And so they have already published useful guides, for instance, encoding guides, public documents, metadata. Perhaps I'm not sure if metadata are that, but maybe they will be. Also for transliteration, so transliteration guides to standardize this enormous amount of material, so that it is kind of interoperable, searchable, easily. And this is all online. You can look for the Dharma project, ERC funded, and they have put on GitHub and other repositories these guides, these materials that hope to become, of course, to give a guidance also to other projects that want to do similar things. So they have thoroughly thought these things for, and with many scholars working on many different type of material. So I think it is a very good, way of overcoming certain problems that scholars have when they want to create these online repositories. It is not always easy, straightforward when you work with these pre-modern texts that are far from being standardized.
Thank you.
Yes.
So the questions are in the chat box. So Professor Venkatakrishnan asks, can an ISBN-like ID, is it possible to have an ID like ISBN?
Okay, can ESB-like ID? I see. Okay, this is an interesting point. Yes, I can tell. I can only say that we don't use it. I'm not using it for the British Library project. I mean, we have identifiers, catalog. Let's say according to our own, numbering. It's the name of the project, EAP, and then the number, and then the name. But this is an interesting idea. So why not? Yeah, it should be ideally like ORCID or DOI. I mean, and ISBN indeed. It should be done. Why not? It should be done also for these objects. The only problem is that I can foresee is that what if you have a manuscript? I mean, then the focus will be on the manuscript and not on the text. For example, you have a manuscript with 3 or 4 different texts. You give the ISBN on the manuscript, no problem, very good. But then the text will be, I think, something else, right? I can see potentially a problem to separate the level of the text and the manuscript, but it should not be a concern. I mean, we want to have a manuscript ID after all. So it's a good idea, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be done widely yet. It should be implemented. Yeah.
There's another question from Prakash Pradeep. So he says he enjoyed your talk. And questions are, did you come across any 2 manuscripts of the same content? And the library that you talked about, is it restricted for normal public?
Okay, thank you very much. So about the same content, yes, very much. Of course, these manuscripts are, texts were sometimes widely copied, and thanks God, because we have, philologist work is precisely to compare 2 manuscripts and create critical editions of text on the basis of, different manuscripts, but they have the same text. So we compare the version and we try to correct any mistakes, any problems. So yes, we do. Interestingly, I can say I'd add that very often, the titles are different. So you have exactly the same text, but the manuscripts have sometimes completely different titles. It is, again, metadata coming, into the picture now. You should be very careful to this. You should put all the alternative titles in the metadata. For example, I have this text called Bhuvanakosha. So I have 3 or 4 manuscripts with Bhuvanakosha or Bhuvanakosa, or etc. And then I have a manuscript with the title Jnana Siddhanta, which is the same text, but a different title. So what shall I do? I should put, there should be a metadata, I think, field for alternative titles. So anybody searching for, Bhuvanakosha will also find the Bhuvanakosha in the manuscript bearing a different title. And this is very important, but unfortunately, this is not very seldom done in these new projects. Then about the libraries, now these are all publicly accessible libraries. So both the newly created museum, you can go. They are actually very keen. If you're very happy if you go, they are opening to tourists, also to local people, to educate them. So it is a very bottom-up initiative, a very laudable. And also the other libraries are public. So it is, thanks God, very easy to access, still very easy to, relatively, let's say, easy to access this material. But many other are not so easy. Of course, there are also private collections or collection kept in temples, for example, or royal palaces. So it is a completely different, type of accession policies. And I also might say that there are many projects involving the digitization of these public collections, but it is, so I don't know who is holding the data, so this is a very huge problem that I think on Bali, the digitization is very trendy. Everybody wants to digitize, but there is no clear target and aim or idea about what are we doing with the data, who is holding the data. First of all, the data are as endangered, even the digital data, if you don't store them properly on a cloud or redundant, and who is holding it, who can access them. So there are people who have this data, or there are different teams fragmented, but there is no central, repository. And so I don't know, the public cannot use this data. So it's just, if you know the person, but this is a problem, I think, really, that has to be kind of change of mentality. Otherwise, why are we doing this? I mean, we really need to know why are we doing this, the target, what is the target, and what are the accession policies.
Hello, Andrea, can I?
Sure.
Hello. Thank you very much, Andrea. It's a very nice talk. I have some observations. It is not questions. First, you mentioned about the subject. In subject, you have mentioned as a Hinduism. I don't know what is the British Library rules or something. You have mentioned only Hinduism there. Are you not more into deep into the subject wise, for example, Shaiva and Siddhanta and Kriya or something Padhati or something, so more detailed subject descriptors that would be more convenient. I don't know how that procedure in that British Library project. That is one thing. Another thing you mentioned about the Bhuvana Kosha, for example. Of course, the inputting this standard method is highly necessary. Otherwise, we cannot retrieve any material which we need. For as you have shown many examples for Bhuvana Kosha in different spellings, it is a very big task. One cannot retrieve the book, even though there may be hundreds of the same text available in that collection. It is difficult to identify those things. For that, are you using any uniform title for such? Maybe again, it is the question of inputting the standard practice of the spelling. I accept that.
Yes, thank you so much indeed. You also see the importance of this. And thank you for your input about Hinduism. I should have added that to the set of problems. So it's equally a problem also for me because this response to the British Library, it is a very general. Let's say to the librarian point of view, they probably have these world religions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, and it's often difficult because sometimes there is neither of them. It's not a Hindu or Buddhist. Maybe it's a text on, I don't know, horses or chicken fighting, whatever. I don't know what to put, so unfortunately, I can only put, these general labels. And there are also problems. I mean, it's also problem sometimes in, of course, Shaivism would fit most of these tests. But sometimes
at least if you give some broader divisions, so it may be easy to retrieve or so we get more focused results.
Yeah, I think you have a point. I mean, it's also if you give very broad, it's good for the keyword, for the metadata. It's not bad after all, because if you are interested in Shaiva or whatever, you put Hinduism and you will see many things. Unfortunately, as you know, the work is the amount of work to be done at the level of cataloging is enormous, and we have a very small team. For each text, you have to know the contents. You have to know exactly what is to talk about sometimes. So it is actually, a formidable task, and unfortunately, it is not. It seems that again, all these projects focus on the digitization part. I think that the cataloging is just, it's easier, but it's actually the most,
it is not easy.
And you need expertise to do that. So we have to, let's say, to work with what we have. And these are, of course, problems. These things are.
And are you giving the beginning and ending of the text portion?
Actually, not.
Okay.
This is a good point. I like very much that, catalogs that give, the beginning and the end.
I think they are more focused on digitizing the material, I think, than the getting what is there in the text.
Absolutely. I think this, basically, ideally, I mean, I don't see this as a proper cataloging. This is just, let's say, the metadata. I think there should be separate projects.
Exactly.
This is a project for the digitization, and then they put it online, they store it permanently. But there should be another project, but then we need funding, to build catalogs by specialists, because I see many of these projects are run by people who have very good intentions. They're doing very good technical work, but they don't have the specialized knowledge of text, and this is not like something anybody can do. People don't realize this, unfortunately. We are very much, I think, as a category, as a scholarly, community, we are not very much understood, and because you need a lot of specific specialized knowledge to deal with these things, and people don't realize it. And even big players like the Internet Archive, they have a very big budget, I guess. They have done a very good job, but they don't realize how important it is to have to consult specialists try to apply best practices in this, in the cataloging of the material.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Andrea, there's one more question in the chat window from Dr. Venkatakrishnan.
Yeah. Yes, I can see the question about are there similar encryptation like Manuscript? I ask forgiveness for my ignorance. I heard it's familiar to me. It's not totally unfamiliar, but I don't know exactly what is the Manuscript. I came across it somewhere, but now I cannot, recall exactly. If somebody can explain to me what is the Manuscript.
Dr. Satyanarayana or Dr. Mishra can help on this.
I also not come across any, because the Modi manuscripts we have very few in Tanjore, I think. But practically I have not seen those manuscripts because I have not worked on any such text which in my critical edition. So I have no knowledge about my Modi script. But I know that there are manuscripts in Tanjore library.
Very good. Yes, I am also not familiar with this tradition of manuscripts, so I'm sorry I cannot answer. But ideally, these transliteration systems, could be applied to all range of index scripts. Sometimes you need to introduce new glyphs, of course, because there are things that are not found in others. But for 90%, it should work. If you apply the same system, this is the point. It should work for all the range of index script in South and Southeast Asia.
Andrea, I don't know if any important questions means people can stop me. Just I'm asking something. Andrea, you are doing digitization is the most priority in your project, isn't it? Are some Sanskrit or the specialist of that field are doing digitization? It means, are you making some markers of in each bundle? There can be a different text. So at least while digitizing itself, some sort of markers could give help to the next further work.
I see. You're basically asking if we are introducing markers to separate the texts within a manuscript.
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
We are not. We are not, because this is not the guidelines. This doesn't reflect. Again, the attention is on the object. This is my impression.
Okay.
They want, really the object to be reproduced and without any obvious, divisions or markers. And this at the level, of course, at the metadata, we are explaining that, there are like 2 or 3 texts, and it is not even compulsory to indicate the leaf numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I can say leaf number 5, for example, there is a new text. It's not required,
Yeah.
So this is, again, we are providing the rough material. We are giving them, we are saying, look, this is a multi-text, there are these texts, but then it's the philologist who has to, easily, it's, actually most of these manuscripts are fairly new. Actually, these are manuscripts copied by, this man, Mr. Devachatra, in recent times. So they are very neatly written. They are very important nonetheless, because they are based on old texts. They are based on texts that may not be available anymore. They are difficult to access, and he's done a very good job. He's a very, very careful scribe. We also have, of course, old manuscripts from the beginning of the 20th century or even earlier, but they are fairly easy to read, and I think we don't have much problems with. We haven't actually implemented this system anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see there is actually another question about how do you get many collections of manuscripts. I'm not exactly sure what the questions specifically intends to ask, but well, let's say if If you need to find manuscripts, let's say you can, you have to go to all the public libraries first, of course, and you have to scavenge all the catalogs, you know, and then there are many private collections also, and this is the word of mouth. In Bali, there are these griyas, these Brahmanical houses, priestly houses, for instance, which usually have collections of manuscripts. Now also social medias are very important, you know, you can find, you know, sometimes these objects, these manuscripts, and people are actually coming, for example, to the museum, you know, itself in that region. They are bringing their manuscript, maybe they have 2 or 3, you know, and they are asking for help to preserve them, you know, to catalog them, to digitize them even. It's very important to educate the people about these objects, and many of these objects are still, you know, thought as powerfully, you know, supernaturally powerful, and so there is still some kind of, you know, fear or about sharing them, you know. So sometimes this is not being properly taken care of. These objects have been destroyed. So it is also important to educate the people with all the respect for the sensitivities, but also to, you know, to try to, nobody wants to steal these manuscripts from them, you know, but just they can be properly, you know, kept and stored and still in the possession of the owner. But, you know, they can also be, you know, curated and even digitized.
I think there are no more questions. And, so we'll end the session now. Thank you very much, Dr. Andrea. It was a very enlightening talk. And I'm sure all of us will benefit from the ideas that you shared, especially the problems that you highlighted from your own practical projects that you're carrying out right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
So we'll have the next session at 11:30 as per schedule. So the session will be by Dr. R. Satyanarayanan from the École française at Pondicherry. So we'll all convene again at 11:30 a.m.